Friday in Tryon, North Carolina. Have you ever winterized a house? Now, if you've never lived in a cold climate, you probably haven't. And if you've never had a vacation home, you probably haven't. But for years, as we had this place in Tryon, North Carolina, and lived in Florida, we would winterize it because once we finished using it in October, it would sit idle until the next spring in at least April. That meant that we'd either have to pay for the power and then trust that the power wouldn't be interrupted during winter storms, or we'd have to winterize it. What does winterizing mean? Well, it means you drain all of the water out of every toilet, back in the bowl, back of the tank. Then you make sure that you've mopped up every last inch of that water, and you put antifreeze if you want to be environmentally friendly, and we should be. You use RV antifreeze, which is glycol with a little bit of alcohol in it. And you put that in what they call a P-trap. That's an area that's underneath a sink or underneath a toilet that keeps the fumes from a septic tank or a sewer system from backing up into your house. So you have to be sure all of the water, every last drop, is out of every toilet. You have to pour about 1/4 of a cup or 1/2 a cup of antifreeze into each P-trap. That means the tubs, that means each of the sinks, and that means dishwashers, that means washing machines, that means every single place where water is used. And so in an average house, that means a couple of bathrooms, all of the sinks, all of the tubs, all of the toilets. And you drain all of that water out of the water lines going to those appliances. Well, many plumbers don't plan on you winterizing, so that means that it's hard to get all of the water out of the water lines that supply the house. And it means you have to have a faucet someplace outside the house to open up to force the water out. Usually you used to have to use air, a compressor or a tank of air to blow air through the lines and make sure that every last drop of water gets out. That doesn't include if you have outside faucets and getting all of the outside faucets drained out and air blown through so the lines don't freeze. Well, that's an abbreviated form. And then you put bug spray around the house to keep the bugs from coming during the winter months, and you put out mouse poison or mouse traps so that mice don't eat all of your bedding and get into the pantry and get into your food. And when you're all done, you make sure everything's locked up good and tight. Why did I tell you that long story? Well, just recently, neighbors across the lake from us who live in Florida and have a house like we have, and they rent theirs. We always used to just lend ours out to friends and to church members. They came up in October and came up again around Thanksgiving, and then they had to winterize their house. And we went through the checklist with them of what they needed to do to be sure their pipes wouldn't freeze. And they winterized their house, got back to Jacksonville, and found out that somebody wanted to rent their house for 3 or 4 days at New Year's. Well, that was just too tempting to help pay for the taxes and all of the upkeep on a house. And so up they came again, all the way from Jacksonville, opened the house back up again. And of course, after the guests left in January, they had to re-winterize. Well, the same things kind of happened to me. If I tried to shortcut winterizing when we were winterizing our house when we lived in Florida, inevitably I would get all of the toilets drained, all of the lines blown clean, and one of the kids would say, "Dad, I've got to go to the bathroom." You try to encourage them to go out into the woods, but in fact, they say, no, it's not that kind. It's the kind where you sit down and we have to let water back into the house, use the toilets, and then winterize that all over again. Listen to Psalm 127:1. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman keeps awake in vain. Well, it was all in vain if you don't consider the fact that somebody may have to use a toilet before you leave. And if you only have one car, you can't all leave at the same time. And so it's a labor in vain when you do all of the winterizing and then somebody has to use a toilet. And so it is in the scriptures we find the Tower of Babel stories found in Genesis chapter 11, verses 7 through 9. They were building a tower. I have no idea how high they got it. But you know, if you look at the Egyptians' work during the days of the pyramids, it may have been quite high. It seems like they understood engineering quite well. In any case, they were building a tower because they wanted to reach into the sky and become like God, become at least equal to God. And the Lord said, they're laboring in vain. And he went down, and it says that he actually caused their languages to be different so that they couldn't communicate and coordinate the building of the tower. And it says he scattered them. I'm not sure how he scattered them, but it says the work on the tower stopped. They had labored in vain. They hadn't consulted with God about building a tower, and they certainly weren't trying to look to God for the strength to build a tower. If you're trying to build your life, and you're not including God for guidance, for direction and protection, then you're laboring in vain. If you're trying to build a family, and you're trying to do it under your own cleverness and your own hard work, you're going to fail every time. Because those that try to build a house without the Lord labor in vain. That's your thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.